Hi there, I'm Savannah Mexto with Mannor Law Group, and I'm excited to welcome you to another Webinar Wednesday with esteemed elder law and estate planning attorney, Robert Mannor. This week's webinar is in light of next week's presidential election. We know the results of this upcoming election day is going to have a big impact on our nation, but what about financial investing? Today, Bob has invited a special guest presenter, Fred Hensler, President and CEO of Sapphire Blue Investment Partners, to discuss just that. Stay tuned to learn what this presidential election means for your financial investments. Now, why should you listen to what the folks at Mannor Law Group have to say? First, note that we're a nationally recognized and respected elder law and estate planning firm. All three of our attorneys are accredited by the Veterans Administration to assist veterans with claims and appeals. Attorney Bob Mannor is nationally board certified as an elder law attorney by the National Elder Law Foundation. He's honored in 2020 as both a super lawyer and a leading lawyer by those peer review lawyer rating organizations. Bob is currently on the executive board of the State Bar of Michigan Elder Law and Disability Rights Section and past president of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys Michigan chapter. Lastly, one of my favorite reasons, Mannor Law Group has been honored by readers of our local paper as the best or favorite law firm for the last 8 years in a row. Now, before I pass the mic to Bob and Fred, I'd like to cover just a few housekeeping details. Now, first, even though Bob is an attorney, today's webinar will not give specific legal advice. If you do have a question about your own unique situation, I encourage you to contact us after the webinar. Also, much like Bob, Fred also has asked me to remind you that as a registered financial advisor, he will be giving general information during today's presentation. If you're looking for specific details about your own financial situation, please stay tuned until the end of the webinar to learn how you can contact his team. Now, if you do have a general question during today's presentation, we do have a question box that you can use. I encourage you to input your questions to that question box because we will save time after the presentation to review those questions. And if for some reason we don't get to your question, we will contact you after the presentation. Also note that today's presentation will be recorded and the replay will be sent out tomorrow so that you can share that with your family, friends, or anyone who you think could benefit from hearing this information. So without any further ado, I'd like to now welcome Attorney Bob Mannor and special guest, financial advisor, Fred Hensler.
Well, hi folks, and Fred, thanks for joining me today. For those listening, I had lunch with Fred recently, and we started talking about the election, and he had some really interesting thoughts about how financial perspective. And so I think we're all worried about a lot of things, regardless of politics and regardless of the outcome of the election. There's just a lot of worry in the world today. And one of the things that talking to Fred helped me think through is where can we find the stability? Where can we find stability? I think that's where most people are looking for when they're when we're talking about investing and making sure that they're going to have the money they need when they need it. And so I invited Fred on because I just thought he had some really interesting thoughts. We're not going to go in a political direction so much as arguing which side should be the right side, as much as talking about what experts believe will be the options and the things that we have to respond to, regardless of, depending on the ins and outs of who wins the presidential election, who wins the legislative elections, and all of that. So Fred, thanks for joining me today.
Bob, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. As we've talked, and one of my passions has always been education to people of something that I think that is sorely missed. I've had the opportunity to be a keynote speaker all across the United States over my 32 years in this industry, and it has always been about helping individuals build an investment vehicle and an investment strategy to make sure that they're doing is what's in their best interest, maybe not so much in the interest of somebody else who might be advising them. I've also been called on to speak with other advisors about what do they do to build a client-centric business? And that's one of the accomplishments that I've been very, very proud of over the years. For those of you who don't know me, I would like to tell you, I apologize, I thought that was shut off. I would like to tell you that Bob and I have worked together over a number of years in regard to cases. I do not receive any compensation for Bob, nor does he receive any compensation for me. This is truly a handshake type distance, but we both appreciate each other's professionalism. The name Sapphire Blue Investment Partners came from the recognition many years ago that I wasn't smart enough to know everything that needed to be done to help people coordinate their total financial affairs. And the idea of partners actually comes from that last word in the title of our organization, where we have teamed with experts in different areas, and whether that be estate planning, veterans administration, making sure that an estate is set up correctly. We've teamed with qualified CPAs and insurance and specialists, and most importantly, we've teamed with some incredible research people who can do a much better job, from my perspective, of getting through all this minutia of data that's out there. And that's what my hope was to share with Bob and to share with the audience today. What is it that we're looking at with the next upcoming election, and why is it not going to be different than anything that we've seen before in the past?
Well, Fred, before we get there, one of the things that we discussed the other day that I thought you had some really interesting insight on was how does any of this make sense with the economy right now? Because we see the stock market going through the roof on, depending on the day. It looks like today maybe not so much, but depending on the day, the stock market's been doing quite well. But we see businesses going out of business, and we see small businesses struggling, and even big businesses that are filing for bankruptcy. So how do you explain that discrepancy?
Well, I think what we have is, number one, we're 6 days ahead of a very monumental election. We just set a new Supreme Court justice. Some people are giddy about it. Some people are absolutely appalled by it. We're in the midst of a pandemic. How in the world does it get any crazier than what it has already? And I think, Bob, to your point, my job is to analyze the data and report what we believe of what's going on. And this is how we see things. So I'm gonna add a little bit of fluff to your exact question, but it's true. The market is within, monumental strides of being back and near its all-time high again. But before we talk about that, let's take a step back and look at that data and really what's out there. And here's what it is that we see. And again, I'm going to talk to some points today. For the audience, please recognize the fact this is not political in nature. I have my own political beliefs, as I'm sure that you do, but I'm going to try and take a Supreme Court process that I want to evaluate what's out there rather than necessarily taking a side. Number one, there have been over 9 million cases of COVID that have been recorded in the United States up until this particular point. There have been 230,000 deaths, which one would say that's far too many, no matter where we sit. There are some extremely sensitive tests that have been developed and are being used, one called a PTS test, that can find both the live and the dead virus. So consequently, anybody that goes in there that tests and they find that there was an antibody, or through this PTS test that there's a dead virus that's in there, that consequently what ends up happening is that that individual still can be considered to test positive. So the 9 million cases is a bit suspect, if we might. Now, I'm not also going to say that hospitals are being paid more for COVID positive individuals, but in all reality, if you go into the hospital with a COVID diagnosis, through the CARES Act, the hospital does get paid additional for that situation. Interestingly enough, if you go in and there's a diagnosis of something else, it could be a gunshot wound, it could be a heart condition, it could be a stroke, and they test you, which they're going to do for safety sakes, and you test that you were either positive currently or you were positive in the past, there is some additional remuneration that goes in on that. 15% of the people in the hospital right now are there because of COVID. 45% are the numbers that we just found that are found to have COVID, even though they're there on an ancillary situation. And that creates a lot of misinformation. If any of you are watching today, Congress, our government officials are questioning data that's being fed to us. The results of that data, no matter how you want to look at it, if it's through Facebook, LinkedIn, or what have you, the death rate of COVID is actually going down. In fact, there was an announcement that was released just recently that indicates that under age 70, the death rate from COVID is actually less than what the general flu that we would experience during a year. I thought those numbers were positive. But let's take a look at what it is that's going on in the investment market. And the talking heads on TV are always talking about market's up, it's reaching near-time highs, or it's back down. And it becomes a very difficult determination. Do I want to invest in the market when the market's at an all-time high or near it? We have an election coming up. Is that a concern that I should have? Should I get out of the market and stay out? And that's some of the stuff that I'd like to chat with about today. The lockdowns that we're seeing are having disastrous effect on small and middle America. In small and middle America businesses, your restaurants are closed. Your favorite restaurateur is likely not going to be able to make it. In Chicago, they've shut everything back down again on a retail basis, on a small basis. There was a family on the news this morning that was working in their business and the doors were locked, and they ended up receiving a citation because they were considered to be open even though nobody was in the store. So it's kind of gone all cattywampus as far as that situation is concerned. However, when we look at small America, while it's very, very important, that's not what drives our economy. Our economy is driven by big America. And companies like Amazon and Network and Netflix and Facebook and now Zoom, which has been a stellar performer in the stock market, they are seeing explosive earnings. They're seeing explosive use. How many of you have sat at home and ordered something off of Amazon? Well, the more you order off of Amazon, the more movies you watch on Netflix, the more you use a Zoom conference, the more revenue that they're going to generate. And there are stocks called the FANG stock, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, that are at the top of the S&P 500 index, and they're making money hand over fist. There is a huge amount of control of what goes on in the economics of the stock market that's driven by the technology companies that are out there. So while we sit back and say small America is closing down, giant corporate America is still going forward, and what happens? We see the marketplace continue to go up. So hopefully that helped just kind of set the stage for today. Bob, I would ask the listeners, and if anybody wants to go ahead and send you a question on this, does anybody out there really know, or I can pose this to you, what does cause the stock market to go up, or what causes the stock market to go down? Is it just a crapshoot, or is there actually reason for it? Is it the earnings of the companies? Is it the GDP? There's a gazillion different monitors out there. But what's the true reason that the stock market goes up in value?
Now you're above my pay grade there, so that is so enlighten us.
Yeah, and I will simplify this, and you might sit back and say I'm absolutely out of my mind. What makes the stock market go up is simply when there are more buyers than sellers. And what makes the stock market go down is when there are more sellers than buyers. Now, does the GDP, does profitability, does recognition, does that come into play? Absolutely it does. But when it really comes down to it, if you own a stock at $50 a share and there's a whole bunch of people that want to buy that stock, there's only a finite number of stocks that are out there. So consequently, what ends up happening is that the more people that want to buy that security, the price actually goes up. So that's a grand part of what we're seeing. And to your question, why is the stock market up right now? Well, think about it. If people are watching movies on Netflix, if people are buying stuff from Amazon, if we're sitting around on Facebook and chatting with our friend and we're reading the ads that are being posted, which is one of the only ways that we're getting information, and even to the point of the TV companies, while they've lost revenue from movies, but they're still, the television channels are still there, and there's a whole bunch more. When I remember when we had a black and white TV with rabbit ears and 3 channels that you literally had to get out of your chair to change the channel. So there's a lot of companies that are still making massive earnings, and if we want, in this presentation, I can discuss how and why and what we're seeing as far as the regeneration of the data that we've been following.
Well, let's get to the main topic that we are here for, which is what is the thought process as far as who gets elected, which side wins where, in what house, and the executive branch, legislative branch. So you had you've done a little research on this, and you have some general thoughts about what to expect, regardless of who, or not regardless, but based on who wins and who doesn't win.
Well, I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make is when we try to outguess and forecast the market. And, we put up that disclaimer out there. I can't make any guarantees of what's going to happen. And just because it happened in the past doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen in the future. But let's think about this for a second. There are those that are just screaming bloody murder that says if Trump gets reelected, it's going to ruin the economy and everything's going to fall apart. And there's approximately half of our population that believes that. And there's another half of our population that says if Biden gets elected, the market is going to fall apart, the country is going to fall apart, and everything's going to go all to pieces. And there's an equal weighting of that. Well, this is not necessarily new. This has been a feeling that's gone on for years and years and years and years. And I found this statistics, I love statistics because I think that they are great metrics to measure on. But if we go all the way back to 1949 and you would put $10,000 in what is now the S&P 500 index, and you just left the money there, and you didn't try and outguess what was going, or if it was a Democrat that was in office or if it was a Republican in office, it would have grown to about $2.4 million as of here just recently. I don't know if we can include today's in because the market's down some. But that's a pretty formidable return, 10 grand to 2.4 million. I think everybody would take that, although it was over a long period of time. This is what I find interesting, is had you taken that same $10,000 and put that money in the market from 1949 and let it ride until now, except the one change that you made is that you took the money out of the market anytime that there was a Republican in and left the money in the market when there was a Democrat in, it would have grown to $240,000. Now think about it.
Looks like we might have some connection issues here. So, well, we'll try to get Fred back here. It looks like his video might have frozen up. Or maybe it's mine.
It is Fred.
Okay. Well, so we'll give it a second. Well, hopefully his video gets back into gear, and we will talk about a couple of different things. As far as our end of it, we are for our clients, they would know that we have been talking quite a bit about. Looks like maybe he's gonna log out and log back in. We'll see. Yeah. So we've been talking about the investments, particularly as it relates to IRAs and Roths and those types of accounts. And the reason is because they just made a major change in the law. And in addition to just the general idea that you need to keep up to date on the law, it does kind of show the necessity of the interaction between your legal planning and the financial planning. And a lot of people don't think of that. So I actually have lots of folks that come into the office, whether they're coming in to talk about their will or trust, or whether they're coming to talk about because they're worried about paying for care, for in-home care or nursing home or that type of thing, where lots of folks, they don't even realize that there is that interaction or interconnectivity between finances and the legal documents, or finances and care. And it's one of the first things we need to know about. We can't give you good advice unless we know the nature, the types of investments that you have, the nature of assets that you have, and how they're titled, how they're if it's an IRA, if it's a Roth, if it's a non-qualified annuity, what is the specifics about those investments. And so it is it's crucially important that you can't get good legal advice unless it's specific to what your circumstances are. And of course, your circumstances will change, and we need to have your legal documents be adaptable to that. But it is very true, especially, for example, with regard to those retirement assets that we've been talking so much about lately, is that we have to make sure that your legal planning is aligned with your financial planning. And so often that you will find that I'll talk to financial advisors, and so often we'll find that they do not often communicate with their clients' lawyers, or lawyers don't communicate with their clients' financial advisors. And that's a bad thing, because that means that the finances and the legal planning are not aligned properly, because they can't be if you don't have a line of communication open with your clients' other advisors. And so it really is crucial to make sure that they line up properly, and that we've got a smooth transition to what happens if you become incapacitated, what happens if you need long-term care, and of course what happens if you die, or when you die, and what are the tax consequences of that. How can we minimize those tax consequences, smooth the transition, make sure that we're maintaining all of the tax options. One of the big things now is that we just have to make sure that we create options for the children. So if you die, people often think, okay, you die, we just transfer the money. It's not that simple. It's really not that simple. It comes down to you die, and then you need advice. The kids are going to need advice. It looks like Fred is back, and we'll just wait till we can hear him. But I'll keep talking until then. It's become more and more important that it's not just about doing the planning prior to your death, but at your death, the kids need to get proper legal and financial advice, because they can make some really, what seems to be intuitive and what seems to be normal is, hey, we're just going to transfer the money. Sometimes there could be severe tax consequences for that, and making proper investment decisions, proper legal decisions is so important. And I've come to this conclusion over time. I used to try to make it as simple as possible to transfer the assets, very simply after death. What I realized was that often didn't create the best answers. So, Fred, it looks like you're back.
I'm back.
I decided to take a lunch break. I apologize, folks. We ended up, there's somebody outside doing some work, and it appears that they cut our internet line. So I
Oh my
transitioned
goodness.
to a hotspot. Out of all times to have that happen, correct?
Yeah. So
So
you were getting into, you cut out right about when you were talking about how that stability and kind of staying with the program is more important than trying to predict which party's going to be in office. But then you were kind of adding on to that.
Sure. Well, there is some predictability about it. The one thing that we know about the stock market as an investment is that it is volatile. It goes up and down. However, we're keenly aware of the fact that every time that the market has declined, and even in great numbers, going all the way to back to the Great Depression, what ended up happening is that it recovered not only to its previous number, but has reached new highs again. And we have no reason to believe that based on our capitalistic society that that will necessarily change going into the future. We've been in situations where the House controls, or the government is controlled by a Congress, a Senate, and a president that is left-leaning or democratic in nature, and we've been through time periods where all three have been to the right. And it's going to be pretty hard for us to say, well, it's going to make a lot of difference of what happens. Could this time be different? And Bob, you and I have talked about that before. Could this time be different? The situation that we're looking at is we recognize the fact that the Democratic candidate has made it keenly aware that he is going to unravel the tax cuts that were in place and that there will be a tax increase. Now, we don't know what the number is to that or who it's going to affect. In some cases, it was on people that make over 400,000. On some cases, it's going to be all across the board. It depends on who you believe and what you see. But it has been made keenly aware that that's going to happen. I think the solace that I find in this situation, which takes me back to those numbers. Was I still on when I was quoting the numbers of what happened to $10,000 in the S&P? Okay. I don't see any reason that we're going to see a lot of differentiation in the short term if, in fact, anything happens in this election, except if we find that one of the two political parties mandates the control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. If the House is controlled by the left and the Senate is controlled by the left, you still have that third branch that's up there as the president who's going to be able to authorize controls. If the House is controlled by the right and the Senate is controlled by the right and the White House is controlled by the right, then you're going to have some situations, as we've seen in the past, where things may happen that may have not happened for quite some time because they have ultimate control. But if it's a right Congress, a right Senate, and a left president, the same scenario is going to happen. The analysts that are out there that we deal with, their concern is that if the Democrats can control or maintain control of the House, they flip the Senate and they get the White House, that it's going to have a pretty dramatic effect on taxes. And with that effect on taxes, what we're going to see happen is it's going to have a pretty dramatic effect on corporate America. It's going to have a dramatic effect on employment and unemployment. And those factors alone will create a quandarium of more sellers than buyers. And ultimately, we will see the stock market as well as the economy diminish quite a bit.
So when it comes to that, I was talking with you the other day about your thoughts on taxes and interest rates, and frankly, I look at it from the standpoint of well, it feels necessary. The stimuluses have been trillions of dollars, and they're talking about another $1 trillion+ stimulus. And well, it seems necessary and to make sure that the economy keeps going. Someday we got to pay that back. And so, what are your thoughts about, regardless of who's in office, the effect on taxes, future taxes and interest rates? And is there anything we can do about it as investors that we should be, thinking about or preparing for?
Well, that's a great question, Bob, and it's a difficult question to answer. And again, I'm going to go back and indulge into the political arena, and I'm going to be politically agnostic. I'm just quoting data. The data says that the left is indicating that their belief system is that the millionaires and the billionaires need to pay their fair share. They need to pay more than what it is that they're paying, and that those who are not of that level shouldn't necessarily be in that pool. You've got the Republicans whose historical belief system is, going back to Reagan's trickle-down economics, that if you give everybody an opportunity to work and earn money, that they're going to pay taxes on that money, they're going to pay taxes on their profit, they're going to go buy new houses and build new houses, and that's going to create tax streams, so that's going to be a positive that's there as well. The data, the realistic fact that most people don't think about is, if you raise taxes, what would be a reasonable amount to raise taxes on millionaires and billionaires? 5% more, 10% more, 20% more? The facts are, if you actually confiscated the wealth of all of the millionaires and billionaires in the United States, you would likely not pay off the national debt that we see right now. I believe it's at $24 trillion as we speak. That's a big number, and it's behind us and it's beyond us. The only way that I see that we're going to be able to reduce the debt, and this becomes a mathematical calculation, is by increasing inflation. Inflation has been really, really low for a long time, but if you recognize the fact of what inflation really is, it reduces the dollar value that you have. So instead of a gallon of milk costing $1, it now costs $3. That's how you get away with that. So the potential is that inflation could be our biggest fearmonger, and if in fact inflation rears its head and we go back into the days of the 70s where the inflation rates were in the 6, 8, 10, 12, 15% level, as were mortgage rates, as were interest rates on a CD, that would be the way that we could artificially reduce the amount of debt that's out there. And if I might, I want to talk about inflation for just a second. And again, I'm creating and reciting data that we have. Right now, the historical inflation rate for the last 10 years has been about 1.5%. You really haven't noticed things going up. Now, housing values have gone up, and that would be part of the factor. The reason for that is interest rates are really, really cheap right now. So we have a supply demand. People can afford a bigger, better house. They go out and they buy it. That's the American dream. People who couldn't afford a house now have the ability, because interest rates are in the 2.5%, 3% level on a 15-year mortgage. You can buy a lot of house at 3% interest, certainly a lot more house than if you were paying 9 or 10% interest. So consequently, what we're seeing is that has created an infusion of the valuation of real estate. But overall, a gallon of milk is, about 1.5% more than it was a year ago. The federal government monkeys with the money a lot. They do, and there's nothing that we can do to control it. We can only control our own destiny. If inflation has been at 1.5% for the last 10 years, they've indicated that they would like to see it level off at about an average of 2%. Well, for them to get to 2%, that means they could easily raise the inflation rates to 2.5% or 3% or 3.5% to try and get back to that 2% average. And if in fact that happens, our concern is it's going to be letting the genie out of the bottle. And then all of a sudden we're going to see runaway inflation that happens. So the hope is that they have the wherewithal to keep the inflation rates under 1.5%. That presents another problem, Bob, is that for those of us who are conservative investors, we used to be able to go down to the local bank and invest money in a certificate of deposit, and it paid us an 8% CD rate for leaving the money in there for 12 months, and we got an 8% interest rate. We made $8,000 on a $100,000 investment. We just had a client send us $100,000 that he had sitting in a CD where the local bank offered him 0.2%. So he's going to get $200 on his $100,000 investment. What do you do with that money? And that becomes the $64 million question. So what do you do with that money?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And, that's one of the things that, I get to is, well, how do people make these decisions on their own? People do the same thing with legal work. They can Google what is a will and try to do their own will. I wouldn't recommend it. I've been paid lots of money over the years fixing people's self-help efforts, and I suspect the same thing applies with money. A lot of people, as they get older, they do think, okay, well, I want to be real conservative, I'm just going to throw it in the bank. But what I'm hearing from you is sometimes that means that you're actually losing money by letting it sit there because of the value of money is going down over the years, is what you're saying.
Well, that's an excellent point that you bring up. And let's think about that exact example. And just to make the math easy, let's say that we're at a 0.5% interest rate and the inflation rate is at 1.5%. That means for every dollar that you're leaving in the bank, you're losing a 1% piece of the purchasing power. I think it would be hard for me as a banker or as a financial consultant to sit down with somebody and say, I've got this great investment idea. You give us $100,000, you leave it with us, and at the end of the year, we're going to give you $99,000 back. We probably would not be at the heap of the process. I will say that when it comes to choosing a financial advisor, first of all, the numbers of people who are recognizing that it makes fiscal sense to pay somebody to help them make quality financial decisions and to monitor and manipulate that is becoming ever increasing. People are recognizing the fact that the do-it-yourself model is not necessarily good. And specifically, not if, but when we come to the next 2000 to 2002, where the S&P 500 index was down 40, 50, 60%, and again in 2008, and that's when people start making really, really bad decisions. I would caution your listeners that there's a difference between a person who is a licensed financial advisor who is under the regulatory environment of the Securities Exchange Commission and the Financial Regulatory Agency. I would urge your listeners to make sure they're dealing with somebody who's regulated. Somebody that's selling an annuity, all they have to do is be licensed with an insurance company, and to hang your shingle on the wall that says, I'm a financial advisor and I sell insurance, is being able to pass a test. Bob, you know full well, for you to be able to hang your shingle on the wall, you had to go through a massive amount of college education and training. You had to pass a bar exam, and you have continuing education credits that you need to follow. That's not necessarily true with everybody that's out there. And we also believe that it's important to deal with somebody that's a fee-based financial advisor versus somebody that's a commission-oriented advisor. If your advisor is telling you, well, I get paid by the company that we're representing the product with, the mutual fund company or what have you, pick up your money and you might want to consider running a different direction, because there's a direct impact and the commissions can be buried in the investment product, and they get paid once, they get paid one time, and then they're off to find their next person.
Yeah.
We want somebody that has that has a vested interest. And it's the point when we do well for our clients, we're compensated fairly for that. When we don't do well for our clients, we also see a reduction as far as our revenues are concerned. And I'll tell you something, I hate losing money, whether it's in my own account or because we lost money for our clients.
You know, I think that's a really valid point, Fred, and it is one of the things that, you know, I try not to step on anybody's toes, but I think when folks think that they have a thorough financial advisor or let's say well-rounded financial advisor, and it turns out that they're not technically a financial advisor, they're an insurance agent. And there's a whole bunch of folks out there that's all that they're allowed to, you know, that's all they're licensed to sell. And so a lot of people don't even realize that an annuity is an insurance product. I think there's lots of folks that, you know, they've gotten into different annuities. I'm not saying annuities are always bad or that they're bad at all. I'm not making a judgment on that. You can if you want, but I'm not making a judgment on that. I am simply saying that if someone is holding themselves out to be your financial advisor that's advising you with regard to the broad scope of your options, and the only thing they have that they can even provide to you is an insurance product, I'm guessing you're going to get an insurance product. You're not going to be looking at the variety of options that would be, you know, relevant and appropriate for you.
That's correct. And one of the things that I think is sorely missed in this industry, our belief system is this, and I'm not doing this as a commercial for our firm whatsoever, Bob, but we believe that no financial decision should be made independently of another. That a decision to change your investment strategy, to manipulate your investment strategy, should be in conjunction with your estate planning attorney, your business attorney, your CPA, and please to the listeners, if they take anything away from this, stop trying to do your taxes on your own. Taxes are more complicated than anything that I do, and Bob, I'll stretch out and say anything that you do. I had lunch with a CPA today, and I always learn something because it's a moving, dynamic market. And things that you took deductions for last year, you might not be able to take them this year, or vice versa. You may be able to take them. Now we've got the CARES Act that's come aboard, and there's money that's been coming through. Don't try and go this on your own, no more than you try and do heart surgery on your own. But we believe that it's important that there's a coordination of those total financial affairs, and your advisor should be working not just to give you reasonable investment returns that were within your expectation, but for you to be able to monitor those returns, make sure they're correct, and to make sure that you're not creating a tax environment for yourself that wipes out any of the gains that you've already had. It's about what you keep. It's not necessarily about what you earn. It amazes me the number of business owners that are out there that don't have proper pension plans in place. And because of that, they're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars more than what they should be in taxes. And I'm not calling it a tax loophole. It's written right into the tax code. This is a perfectly legitimate situation that you have. And whether you're a big corporate business person or whether you're a small person that's eking out a living, there's an opportunity for you to keep more of what it is that you have. And I know that you do that in your business model every single day to make sure that people keep what it is that they have.
You know, you said a couple of things there that I just wanted to stress, and we call it holistic planning, and it's very much been you know, deep seated in who we are as a law firm, has always been for many years a very holistic approach to trying to make sure that we're not being narrowly focused on, well, you know, this person's called up and they said that they want a deed, or this person called up and they said they want a power of attorney. Okay, that's not how you talk to your doctor, right? You don't go into your doctor and say, I saw this commercial for this drug and just give me the drug, right? Give me the drug. I don't want any tests. You can't ask me any questions. just give me the drug. That shouldn't be the way that we do financial advice, and that shouldn't be the way that we do legal advice. The holistic approach is the only way that you're going to get reasonable answers. And then I was laughing because when I was a much younger man, I did try to do, I figured, hey, I'm a smart guy. I did taxes for other people when I was in school. It was when I made a little bit of money, so I decided, of course I'm gonna do my own taxes. Why wouldn't I do my own taxes? And it was the best thing in the world many years ago when I stopped doing my own taxes. And then I realized all the things in the tax code that I didn't know and options that we had. And so couldn't agree with you more. Frankly, I think it relates to so many different things. Let the plumbers do the plumbing, let the lawyers do the lawyering, let the tax accountants do the tax accounting, and the financial advisors give financial advice, because you can get so much better answers and results if you rely on the experts. And then, of course, the bottom line, and this is where it becomes difficult, is making sure that the people that claim to be the experts really are, that they are. And part of the way I think that you can do that is conversations like we're having right now. You can tell by just the conversation that we have that we know our field, and that we're thorough in our field, and that we're not going to be pushing people in one particular direction. Everybody's situation is different, and the advice that we give each individual is going to be different. And if you're giving everybody the same advice on everything, you're not really an advisor. You're a salesman. You're not an advisor. And so I laughed about the taxes because I fell victim to that many years ago, and I realized the error of my ways as soon as I got a good accountant.
Well, you're dead on that, Bob, and I don't know how many times that I've advised people to bring in a CPA into their world, not a little corner person that took a course in tax advice, but bring in a qualified licensed CPA. And what our findings have been, and again, I can't guarantee this is going to be the fact for everybody, is that the additional funding that it costs to have that person properly prepare your taxes comes back to you tenfold as far as the amount of money you get back in your pocket. And that, in my mind, is critical. Again, to the point, it's not what you earn, it's what you keep.
And that's so true. Almost all of the time, it's more expensive not to hire. To hire a quality, well, I know for the work that we do, most of the time it's going to be more expensive not to hire us. And I think that's probably true for financial advisors, or good financial advisors. I'll tell you a quick story. I had, this was somebody that never became a client. They came in, they talked to us about becoming a client. They had quite a bit of money, and they had done quite well for themselves, but their kids hadn't. And they had a special needs child, and they were going to leave a fairly large chunk of money to a special needs child, and then have her child manage it. So the grandson was going to be the trustee and manage the money and all of that. And I came in and I said, there's just too much money here for somebody that's not used to having money or managing money. To put them fully in charge of this. Why don't we bring in a professional to help? And so when you're gone, you'll have this professional that's going to make sure that your daughter's taken care of and all of that. And they said, yeah, that sounds good. And so I brought in a trust company to meet with them. And as soon as they started asking about the fees, they said, oh, no, we can't do that. We can't pay those fees. And I tried to point out to them, look, they're going to make back their fees. They were going to be investing the money and making sure that they're getting a proper rate of return and all of this too. They're going to make back their fees. Your grandson isn't. Your grandson's going to make mistakes. And by the way, your grandson just lost his house to a foreclosure, and you're putting millions of dollars in his hands. This is a bad idea, but they couldn't see it. They couldn't see the value, because all they could see was the dollar amount they're writing on the check. And the truth is, when it's good services, when it's good professional services, most of the time it's the cheapest option out there. It's going to be much more expensive to make the mistakes that you could make.
pay me a little bit now and not so much later. Yeah, to that point too, Bob, I think education is important. We don't ask any of our clients to become masters in stock picking or ETFs or unit investment trusts or third-party managers, but we believe that there's an awareness that should be there. We send out a weekly update to our clientele and quite frankly, anybody that wants to get it. As far as what happened in the market, what we perceive is going on in the market. Since the COVID thing came on, we actually send out a weekly COVID test as well. And it's not a test, it's a what's going on. How many people have it, how many people have died, and what's the age ranges that are there. It's good quality information. That leads me into the next point, which is I see this happen time and time and time again. For whatever reason, please don't call me sexist in this case, but for whatever reason, men make the financial decisions and women outlive men by a substantial number of years. And consequently, what happens, we have a group in our firm called Suddenly Single, which deals with death, divorce, and dementia. And it always has one characteristic that's the same. Large amounts of money are dumped onto an individual that has not prepared themselves for that money to be forthcoming. So we always encourage people to make sure that they're educated in their own financial affairs. If you and your husband or you and your wife are meeting with your attorney, with your financial advisor, with your CPA, make sure that both of you participate in what's going on so you can bring your level of knowledge and education up. I think that that's a huge, huge piece of advice. That's one of my 5-star tips. And it'll eliminate that fact of somebody making bad decisions as far as selection of a CPA, an advisor, or an attorney.
So Fred, you mentioned that you have these reports that you send out to both clients and non-clients if they're just interested in getting your reports. How would be the best way for folks to get those reports? How can they get on that list so that they get those reports?
Yeah, actually, if you'd like, you can go ahead and email me. It's very simple. It's Fred at S as in Sam, the color blue, and the initials IP.com. So Fred at SBlueIP, that's indigo purple.com. If you just email and say, please include me on this list. If you want to add please add your name so we know who we're sending it to. We're not going to call you. We're not going to pester you. We're not going to bother you. We may send you an email that says, what other information might you like to hear? And that's basically what it is going to be. But every Monday and every Tuesday, you're going to receive what happened in the past week. You're going to see what are we anticipating going forward. Every Tuesday, you're going to see a COVID test. And we have a thing called Motivational Mondays. Bob, I think you're on that list. And it's just a little saying that we like to send out to have people start their week on a good basis. And it's probably one of the best pieces that we send out all week long, as it starts you out with a good feeling about yourself and a positive way to start the week. So again, Fred at SBlueIP.com. I'll pass that along to our staff. We have a pretty significant staff here that runs all of our communications. I'd love to be able to push that information out to you, just as quality information is concerned.
Savannah put that email address in the chat box here. If anybody didn't catch it, it's you can see it in the chat box, and so feel free to get on get those reports. Let's kind of start wrapping things up here. And Savannah, are there any questions? And if you have a question and you haven't typed it in yet, this would be the time to type in your questions.
Thanks, Bob. But we actually do have a question. This question is for Fred, and it comes from Steven. And he wants to know, what does Fred do with his cash to earn safe returns?
That's kind of a loaded question. That's
Bring it on, Fred.
I'm gonna, before you answer, Fred, I'm gonna give the standard lawyer answer that lawyers can answer the same answer no matter what the question is, and it's the classic lawyer answer of It depends.
Well, I will share this with you. When I have cash available, our family has a large horse breeding operation that is
There you
run
go.
by my daughter in Kentucky. And if you ever want to find a place to put cash, the horse business is a place to put it. There's the old saying, how do you end up with a small fortune in the horse business? You start out with a large
With a
fortune.
large fortune, right?
But
You want
you
your
know,
cash to go in the other direction, yeah.
yeah, and Stephen, thank you for that question. I think that's a great question. What is it that you do? Number one, this is important. Again, this is another 5-star tip. If you have money that is sitting in cash, that money should likely be sitting in cash because there is the likelihood of a need for it. If that's money that you're going to use because you're going on vacation, if it's money that you're going to use because you're going to be purchasing a house in the next 6 to 12 month period of time, then leave it in cash. Leave it in a money market fund, leave it at the local bank. You're not going to get any interest in it. I don't purport that you put it in a sugar jar up on the shelf in the kitchen, because if the house burns down, you're going to lose that. So there's a sensibility that's there. There are banks that run promotional rates that pay larger amounts. We'd be happy to go ahead and point you to some of those banks if you'd like. But cash should be kept as far as cash purposes are concerned. The other thing, again, and this is something to discuss with a financial advisor, far too often, and there are a number of advocates of keeping 6 months cash in case you need it for an emergency fund. And I often ask people, well, what is that emergency fund? Is it your house, the house burns down or the roof blows off? Well, you have insurance for that. You get into a car accident, you keep insurance for that. You're unemployed. Are you going to stay unemployed for a significant period of time? Or are you in a position where you're going to be able to pick up another job relatively frequently? And what ends up happening is that, again, any dollar that you leave in cash right now or in a money market fund, fundamentally you're losing money based on inflation. So keep your cash limited to what it is that you're going to need. We, on occasion, will advise a client, if you have a lot of equity in your home, get an equity line of credit, not to spend it, not to go out and buy a new boat, not to go ahead and pay off your car so you can get another one, but use the equity that you have in your home as your true emergency fund, and then go ahead and invest the rest in something that fits your dynamic from a standpoint of low risk, medium risk, and high risk. And I truly believe everybody can afford to have a little bit of all three of those components.
Yeah. Well, Fred, thanks so much. Great advice today. Really appreciate your time and your thoughts. I'm going to have Savannah kind of wrap things up here and give some additional information about how to get a hold of us.
Thanks,
Great.
Bob, and thanks, Fred. This was definitely
much.
a fantastic webinar. I learned a lot, so thank you both. And thanks for everyone else for joining us today. As Bob mentioned, or may have mentioned, we do have a way for you to contact our team. So more than just getting in touch with Fred Hensler with his team, which we still do have that email there in the chat. I'm also going to put another link in the chat, and this is to actually get in touch with our team. What we do is allow you to click this link and choose a day and a time that works for you when a member of our team can reach out to you and give you a call. This call will last about 15 minutes, and there's no cost for the call, there's no risk, there's no obligation to sign up. It's simply a way for you to get to know our team and for us to get to know you and your situation. So our team will ask you a few questions about your concerns. You can ask us questions about our firm, about our attorneys, about our process, whatever it is that you like. And at the end of the call, if you decide that you'd like to meet with one of our attorneys, then we can schedule that appointment. The good news is that if we decide, or if you decide, we might not be the best fit, we always will try to help you find someone who is. So I do encourage you, even if you're not sure, to click that link and connect with us. So I'll go ahead and put that, it is still in the chat. I'm also sending out an email to you That email should have been there. If it's not there already, it'll be in your inbox any minute, and you can find that link there as well. Thank you all so much for joining today. Have a great day.